I remember not that long ago when we were sending like 4 or 5 kids to Camp Pettyjohn. This year we're pushing 20. I think we'll pass it, so I'm excited, and this is a cool way to get to do this. Where are the Smiths? There they are. Luke, Hannah, will y'all come down here real quick? Bring those girls with you. I'm not going to hold that baby yet. You're going to have to let me do it now. Every time I see her, she's asleep. Whose baby sleeps all the time? You pray harder than I do, apparently.
She doesn't sleep at night.
Oh, okay. Can I hold her? Is it going to be too much of a wake her up?
Might be too
Too much of a wake her up. Okay, fair enough. Well, this is Caroline. You already know the Smiths, but this is Caroline. Normally I'd hold her up and show her to you, but she was born, a month ago?
Yes.
Yeah, a month ago. And they came on Easter, but it just was kind of crazy that morning. Yes. But we wanted to introduce Caroline to you as our brand newest member. Congratulations, you guys. Abby's being a great big sister. And they dress to match, but you can't see. So you're going to have to come see Caroline and say hi to her after worship. But congratulations, you guys. And Caroline, welcome to the world. Love it. I am so excited about this New to Adams cohort. If you are new here, and we have had, oh my goodness, I think we counted this week, something like 35 new people have just come and joined us and showed up and started journeying with us since December. So we are glad to have you here with us, and we said we got to help you get to know us and us get to know you, and all of us get to know Jesus. So we're doing this New to Adams cohort. It's going to be a 2-week thing. You saw it in the announcements, but I just want to remind you to get online and sign up. It is going to be May 17th and 24th, an hour and a half each Wednesday night. It's just a chance to get to know what makes Adams tick, to see how you fit here. We are disciples making disciples as we love, share, and serve like Jesus, and we want you to be a part of the story of what God's doing in your life and hopefully here at Adams as well. And I was also, before we get into the sermon, I want to remind you, Shrek the Musical is next week, which is a weird thing to announce at church, except for 4 of our teenagers are involved in it. So go out next week, go to the high school, watch Shrek the Musical, be ready to critique, all 4 of them, tell them all that. No. Go out and be an encouragement. It's going to be a great show. It always is. We have a lot of really talented teenagers here, and it'll be fun to go support them. I want to say last week I missed you. I was in Exeter, California, saying goodbye to my grandpa, and I appreciated so many of your kind words, your messages of support or love or prayers. I really do appreciate that. But anytime I'm out of town, we get a different flavor for worshiping with other families, that are all part of God's large family. They say that absence makes the heart grow fonder. That's only true if you're in a healthy relationship. Finally away from that bum. And every time we go, we've gone all kinds of places. Sometimes it's bigger churches, sometimes smaller, sometimes churches of Christ, sometimes not. But I tell you, every time we're not here, I miss you. I miss this church family. So it's good to be back. It's good to be home. Good to be back with you. And thank you for your love and support and those prayers over the last couple of weeks. All right, we are continuing. It's been a couple of weeks off this series on church building, and if you're new around here, the idea of church building is kind of a play on words. It's a metaphor, because to build a healthy church is to build healthy Christians. The church is people, not the building we meet in. And so when we build a healthy church, it is making sure that whatever we are rooted in is connected to the right things. And so we started with the idea that we're built on the foundation of Jesus. You probably can't see that floor anymore from there. You can see it on the live stream. But the foundation here says Jesus on it. We have some different titles for him on the front of the stage. And then we said everything that the church does, that a Christian does, must be built and understood on the example and the life of Jesus. And then we said from there, we looked at what it means to understand truth. We talked about, is the Bible trustworthy and reliable? Can we trust that Jesus existed and that we can know anything about him? And what does it mean to live in line with the truth that we understand through Jesus? And then we spent a month talking about God the Father. It was 1 week in the sermon calendar, so we're a little behind. We may be talking about this stuff in 2025 at this rate. But it was good to dive in. My mind was blown. My life was changed. My relationship with the Father was changed. And I hope yours was blessed as well. But it's been a while since we got to flip a board. And these boards, these are the studs that hold up the walls of the church. They're not the foundation. That is always and only Jesus. But we moved from the Father this week to begin talking about the Son. Now, Reese Birch, I have been told, was speculating on where we were going to go, and he said, well, we can't talk about Jesus anymore. We put him on the floor. Reese apparently doesn't know me as well as I thought he did. I talk about Jesus till he comes back and be happy with it. But we're going to talk about this idea of what does it mean for Jesus to be the Son. When Jesus shows up in Mark's gospel, there's a critical question. The disciples put it perfectly when they say, who is this man? Even the wind and the waves obey him. This question is meant to catch your attention, and different people answer it different ways in Mark's gospel. The disciples just ask it. Theirs is the learning journey. The demons, they identify Jesus quickly. They call him Son of God. And Jesus repeatedly shuts them up and tells them, don't say that. Don't talk, be quiet, and then he drives the demons out. The religious leaders answer this question, who is this man, by saying he's a blasphemer. This is a person who is disrespecting God at the most fundamental level. He's doing the wrong thing. He's some kind of a false teacher. When Jesus asked the disciples, who do other people say I am, they answer the question from the words of other people. Well, some people say you are the prophet Elijah reincarnated, someone that they've been waiting to show back up. Some people say you're a prophet, that you speak for God. Some people say you're John the Baptist who had recently been beheaded and you're brought back from the dead. Some people think that you're that guy. Same question. Who is this man? Lots of different answers. Now that's all very interesting, but who does Jesus say that he is? Jesus uses this title, Son of Man. That's where Jesus starts. Let everybody else call him something else, but Jesus says, I am the Son of Man. Flip over with me, if you would, to Mark chapter 2. This would be a good little example. Mark chapter 2 is going to be on page 802 in these Bibles that we share. And if you are new here, new to Adams, and you don't have one of these Bibles yet, you don't have to use this Bible. The best Bible, the best translation is the one that you will read, but we'd love for you to have it so you can flip to these pages with us, especially if the Bible is new to you or you're new to it. Mark chapter 2. Let's read verses 5 through 12 together. Seeing their faith, this is the faith of some guys that lowered a paralyzed man down through the ceiling. Seeing their faith, Jesus said to the paralyzed man, my child, your sins are forgiven. But some of the teachers of religious law who were sitting there thought to themselves, what is he saying? This is blasphemy. Only God can forgive sins. Jesus knew immediately what they were thinking, so he asked them, why do you question this in your hearts? Is it easier to say to the paralyzed man, your sins are forgiven, or stand up, pick up your mat, and walk? So I'll prove to you the Son of Man has the authority on earth to forgive sins. Then Jesus turned to the paralyzed man and said, stand up, pick up your mat, and go home. And the man jumped up, grabbed his mat, and walked out through the stunned onlookers. They were all amazed and praised God, exclaiming, we have never seen anything like this before. In Mark's, right here at the beginning of Mark's gospel, you see this tension. They're trying to identify who Jesus is, and while he is doing things that only God is supposed to be allowed to do, he calls himself the Son of Man. And it's not just here. This Son of Man language is used 82 times over the course of the Gospels. Most of those in the Synoptics, but even in the Gospel of John that uses the Son of God language a lot more, Son of Man is still used there regularly. This was Jesus' primary title for himself, Son of Man. What does it mean? That actually seems to be the thing that they are all wrestling with. So to understand who the Son of Man is, you have to kind of get into the Jewish worldview and mindset. And this language shows up in the Old Testament most specifically in the book of Ezekiel. Turn there with me. We're going to read a bit of scripture this morning. Ezekiel is on page 666. Yes, you're allowed to turn there. Wouldn't it be funny if we just skip that page in the Bible? Like no buildings have a 13th story. It just goes from 12 to 14. From 665 to 667. In the book of Ezekiel, the prophet Ezekiel has a vision. Not just a vision from God, but a vision of God. We're just going to read the tail end of it, starting in verse 26. Above this surface was something that looked like a throne made of blue lapis lazuli. And on this throne, high above, was a figure whose appearance resembled a man. From what appeared to be his waist up, he looked like gleaming amber, flickering like a fire. And from his waist down, he looked like a burning flame, shining with splendor. All around him was a glowing halo like a rainbow shining in the clouds on a rainy day. This is what the glory of the Lord looked like to me. When I saw it, I fell face down on the ground, and I heard someone's voice speaking to me. "Stand up, Son of Man," said the voice. "I want to speak with you." If you were to look down at verse 6, once again, you see the title, Son of Man, do not fear. In verse 8, Son of Man, listen to what I say to you. In chapter 3, verse 1, Son of Man, eat what I'm giving to you. Verse 4, then he said, Son of Man, go to the people. In the book of Ezekiel, the title Son of Man is used 93 times. But when you put it in its contrast here, the first chapter of Ezekiel is this vision of God. I saw the glory of the Lord. And recognizing who God is, God's response to him is to call him Son of Man. In Hebrew, this is Son of Adam, Son of Man, or Son of Adam. This title is used in contrast to God. That God is holy. God is the one on the throne, and Ezekiel is a son of Adam, which is to say that he lives directly in the story of Adam and that he is also a son of Adam or human. And that's what this phrase often means. When the Jews use it throughout Scripture, Son of Man, Son of Adam, is all over and over again. It is a way of saying you are human, and it's set in contrast to who God is. So when he's called other things, Jesus' answer is essentially, I'm a man like you. I'm a son of Adam. I'm a son of man. And there's this prophetic undertone, right? Jesus is hearkening back to Ezekiel and saying, what Ezekiel did, I am also doing. So there's a prophetic element here. But people keep saying, who is this man? And Jesus goes, I'm a human. This is Jesus' title for himself. He emphasizes his humanity. Now, this may be uncomfortable for some of us who are rooted in the idea that Jesus is primarily the Son of God. That start with the divinity of Jesus. We want to rush to Jesus being the Son of God. But in fact, you'll find very few examples of Jesus calling himself Son of God in the Synoptic Gospels. It shows up, but not very often. This is his preferred title, Son of Man. And we'll get to Son of God next week. But starting with Son of Man is actually really, really good news. When you start with the divinity of Jesus, I think it makes Jesus unrelatable. Anybody else here feel like you relate to a God? Not exactly. I've met a few people who act like they think they're God. But I've yet to meet anybody who I think would, or I've yet to ever feel like I can relate one-on-one to God. He is so utterly different. I feel very firmly rooted in being a son of man. I'm just a human. And so if we start with the divinity of Jesus, that Jesus is God, then how exactly do I bridge the gap from Jesus, or from me to Jesus? There's the same gulf that exists between me and him that exists between me and the Father, which is to say, I can't begin to understand or come close to that nature. If Jesus starts with the Son of God, he is unrelatable. How can we measure up to his lofty perfection or ideals? But that's exactly the opposite of the way that people related to Jesus. Everywhere you look in the New Testament stories, people come to Jesus as someone they enjoy being around. Jesus is exceptionally relatable. Jesus is the guy you would want to hang out with, and he would want to hang out with you. Jesus went to parties and celebrations. Jesus went fishing with the boys. Jesus liked to travel, sometimes to inappropriate places. Jesus enjoyed Caesarea Philippi, if you don't get that reference. Go do your history. Jesus enjoyed meals with his friends. Jesus is a guy that you would enjoy hanging around. But when we think of Jesus and we start with the Son of God, we do him a disservice. We create this relational gap where there need not be. We put a gap between us and Jesus that Jesus worked exceptionally hard to break down. It's like when Patricia Heaton was here. You know Patricia Heaton? This is Patricia Heaton. She played the wife on Everybody Loves Raymond. Back in February, we did the Happy Couples Summit, and Bobby and Lisa Kern came here, and Bobby kind of led that summit, and we went out to dinner with them at Crossing Second one night, and Lauren and I and Lisa and Bobby are sitting around talking about life, and he gets this low voice and he goes, "That woman behind you looks so much like the woman who played the wife on Everybody Loves Raymond." Now, I was never a big fan, didn't really watch it, and I didn't want to do like the awkward, that thing. But he's like, "This lady it looks just like her." I'm like, huh, interesting. I bet she gets that a lot. So then we get done eating and we go home. They were staying at the Hotel Phillips, and as they get on the elevator, this woman that looks a lot like the wife from Everybody Loves Raymond gets on the elevator. They're like, "Hi, how's it going?" They're very friendly. Some of you met Bobby. They're super nice people, and they're just chatting this lady up as they go up the elevator, and they're like, they go to bed and come to church the next morning and do that whole deal. I get on Twitter on like Tuesday, and all these people are retweeting this picture that Patricia Heaton has posted from eating at Wheezy's downtown. She's like, "Sorry, Nashville, but this may be my favorite new restaurant." We're like, "It was her!" And I text Bobby, and I'm like, "Dude, you were right. It was actually her." And he's like, "Oh, man, I wish I would have known. I would have said," what exactly? See, when it's just some lady that kind of looks like Patricia Heaton, you can just talk to her like she's a stranger you're sharing the elevator with. But once she becomes Patricia Heaton, the actress who played the wife on Everybody Loves Raymond and who was shooting a movie here in town, once she becomes the celebrity, Patricia Heaton, now all of a sudden, there's this relational gap, isn't there? Now you refer to her as a celebrity, as someone different or special, instead of just this lady that you happen to eat dinner next to or shared an elevator ride with. All of a sudden, the title or the reality of who this person is and the way it's different from you creates a relational gap that wasn't there before then. Do you see this? When Jesus says, "I am the Son of Man," he's saying, let's not get caught up in the God titles here. Let's not get caught up in this divinity right here, because that's going to create the relational gap. For now, understand me as the Son of Man, a son of Adam. I am a human like you. And now the relationship can begin. Isn't Jesus good to invite us into that kind of a relationship? Jesus has worked hard, has literally moved heaven and earth to let us have this kind of a relationship. And so if we start with Son of God, when he starts with Son of Man, we build this relational gap that need not exist. It's an invitation. Son of Man is an invitation to friendship built on trust. There's another reason the Son of Man, the humanity of Jesus, is so important. It's his humanity that gives us hope of new life. Hebrews hones in on this. Go to Hebrews chapter 4 with me. This is on page 996. But the Hebrews writer really hones in on the hope that we have because of the humanity of Jesus, the Son of Man. I thought I marked it. I'm just going to turn there with you. In Hebrews chapter 4, the author is talking about Christ and what it means for him to have become incarnate. And Christ means, it's used as a lofty word, but it means anointed one or Messiah. And so in verse 14, the author says, "So then, since we have a great high priest," that would be Jesus, "who has entered heaven, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold firmly to what we believe." So in chapters 1 through half of 4, he's talked about the humanity of Jesus and that Jesus has come to be like us, but now he's recognized as the Son of God. Let us hold firmly to what we believe. This high priest of ours understands our weaknesses, for he faced all of the same things we do, yet he did not sin. I'd invite you to underline that last verse there, that he faced all of the same temptations or testings that we do, and yet he did not sin. Jesus was tempted in every way like us, yet he did not sin. Now, again, for those who are new around here, when we say sin, sin is a churchy word. It's helpful to define it. Sin is anything that breaks God's peace between God and people, people and each other, or people and the planet that God created to be in peace with itself. When we hurt one another, that is sin. So the rules that God has, the things that we have called sin for all these years, or the Bible calls sin, there's always a victim, always someone who is hurt. So Jesus came and was tempted in all the same ways we were. All the same relational stress, all the same opportunities to get ahead selfishly, to put himself before others, to do all the things that you and I stumble into, and yet Jesus did not sin. He did not break the peace between himself and God or the people around him. This gives us hope and new life. Because he was a son of Adam, a human, he went through what we go through, but he still followed Yahweh every step of the way. If Jesus is just God, this doesn't help. Because God will do what God will do. God will be true to his own nature. And so if God doesn't do all the things that we do, doesn't sin, well, what hope is that for us? Again, there is a chasm there between us and him. But if Jesus is fully human, if he is the son of Adam, then when he is able to follow Yahweh, this gives us hope. Because it means that if he can, then we can. If Jesus, as a son of man, was free from the necessity of sinning, then we can be too. That's a lofty claim. And I remember the first time I heard someone actually say that. Like, it was so unusual that someone would suggest we could actually be not just free from sin, not meaning free from the consequence of sin, but that we could actually not sin. The first time I heard someone say that, it was so uncomfortably shocking to me that I remember where I was. I was sitting in a Bible class in high school with a new professor. He was new that year, and he said, "How many of you sin every day?" And we said, "Well, of course we sin every day. We're human." And he said, "Not me." Liar. He said, "Of course I don't sin every day. I'm a Jesus follower." But hold on a second, Professor. I've read the Bible, and humans are sinful. We all fall short of the glory of God. And he said, "Yeah, and I've read the Bible, and it says that when you follow Jesus, you're freed from sin." Okay, how can this possibly be true? Can you please explain how it works? And this is what he said. We're sitting in this classroom, the door was closed, and there was this fly buzzing around the room. It's really annoying when you can just hear that one fly. And he said, "You see that fly in here?" "Yeah." "Does it have to be in this room?" "Well, no. I mean, we could kill it, or we could open the door and shoo it out." And so he did. I think he smacked it. I don't remember. But he got rid of the fly, and he said, "Now there's no flies in this room." That's true. Might there be flies in the future? Yes. Someone could leave the door open, could come in under the crack, but there's no flies in here right now, right? Correct. Do we have to let any more flies in today? I don't guess we have to. So if the fly is like sin, why do you have to let it in every day? It's not a question of might it get in eventually. It's a question of why do you assume we should just leave the door open and have a room full of flies? That was an interesting metaphor. I've never forgotten it. And then last summer, we took the twins to a birthday party in Tulsa. And when we got home, there were literally hundreds of flies on the inside of our windows at our house. Lauren is mortified that I'm telling you this morning. We walked into a biblical plague of flies. I was checking the tap. The water wasn't blood. I wasn't too concerned yet. We're like putting lamb's blood on the doorpost so Kai doesn't die. I'm a firstborn too. I'm worried for me. There are flies covering the windows. It is disgusting. And it was not like this when we left. And we like check the doors, they're all closed. And we're like, we don't know how they got in the house, but they all got in at once. Maybe the dog took some trash out in the yard because they steal trash. Don't get me started on that. The dog will take trash in the yard. Maybe they followed him in through the doggy door. But there are, I'm not exaggerating, hundreds. And I know this because I counted, because I went to work, because I can't live like this. I mean, it's filth. And so I ran into the kitchen. I'm like, I don't know how they got in, but I know what I need to do now. And I grabbed the towel, and I began to murder them. I got this towel this morning. It says, "It's not gossip if it's a prayer request." That's not true. And so I grab this towel, and I'm going up to the window, and I'm just like, I'm killing multiple flies per swing. But then they all are like flying around the room now, and it's terrifying. And I chase them throughout the downstairs of the house, smacking them any chance I can, but there are too many of them, and they get in places that I can't even get. So I lay waste to them, but it took me hours to finally clear enough of them out that it didn't feel like a plague anymore. And then we get up the next morning, and there are hundreds of flies on the inside of our windows. Ugh. This isn't going to cut it. This took way too long. And so I go to Walmart, and I get one of these. If you haven't ever gotten one of these, it's electric, and it will shock a fly to death. And so I go to the windows, and I'm like Luke Skywalker. I'm just blocking these things. I'm shocking them. They are exploding in sparks, and I'm murdering dozens of flies. I'm like just chasing them down. But there's that corner in the window where you can't really get this thing to it took forever. And I would come home from work, and there would be more. And it didn't matter how many I killed, they kept showing up. And this is fun, but batteries are expensive. And we get up the next day, and once again, there are dozens and dozens of flies on the inside of our windows. And they cannot be coming in the doggy door, but we have searched at this point. We've gone, Lauren's like, maybe they're coming up through the vents. We go into the basement. There's not like a plague of flies in there. We've searched everywhere. We don't smell anything rotting. We don't smell like a dead animal. All the worst things have gone through our head. We can find nothing. There are just tons of flies every time we get up, every time we come home. And finally, I said, I'm done with this. And we busted out the big gun, literally. This is a bug assault gun. It shoots salt when the safety's off. Karen, David, gun safety. Now, this doesn't look like much to you, but it will make your child cry if you shoot them in the foot. Don't ask me how I know. I will confess to nothing. If you put this sucker about 2 feet from a fly and pull the trigger, they explode. It is so gratifying. And I am like Rambo. I am just murdering them as fast as I can cock this gun. And I finally get rid of them. And we get up the next morning, and there are hundreds of flies on the window. I can't live like this. I could bring in an exterminator, but what are they going to do? Gas them all, and then the next day, magically, there will be hundreds more. I'm afraid an inspector is going to show up. They'll condemn the house. I'm ready to burn it down. It was awful. Wasn't it awful? It was so awful. She's still embarrassed that I'm telling you this. It's not like this anymore. Because after, 3 or 4 days of this, Lauren said, "You'll never guess what I found." She had gotten the dogs a dog bone with like that marrow in the middle of it. And one of these dumb dogs had pushed it underneath the entertainment center where they couldn't see it. It didn't smell, but they had chewed on it, and they had pushed it where they couldn't find it. And then a fly had found it, and they had been breeding on this bone for days. And so she found that bone. She threw it away in the dumpster outside, and I went on one more killing spree. And wouldn't you know it, after that, the flies were gone. I think this is the way that a lot of us live. When we talk about sin, there's a lot of us who live in a condition where if you could see the physical result of it, we would be disgusted or embarrassed to have anybody else around. Yeah, I would never let another person come into our house. We were like canceling plans because nobody's coming in our house while we're living in the plague of flies. But for a lot of us, we just live in our lives with all of this sin, and we act like it's no big deal because nobody else can see it. But if sin leads to destruction, if sin is hurting people, if it breaks the peace, then what it's creating is this filthy mess. And some of us, have just learned to live in it. In fact, in our natural state, we have no other choice. We just live with flies all up in the windows. And what we end up doing, once we get fed up with it, is we try to take care of it on our own. Here we are with our towel or our shocking baseball or tennis racket thing, or even a bug assault gun, doing the best we can to get rid of our own sin. The problem is, here comes the next day, and it's right back to it. Anybody live through what I'm talking about? The world will look at that situation and go, it's not that bad. It's not that gross. I mean, if we all have this problem, then none of us should be worried about it. What you need to learn to do is just live with it. It doesn't matter if it's disgusting, if it's filthy, if it's unsanitary. It doesn't matter if it hurts you or hurts somebody else. It's like someone coming from a house, I don't know, someone lives in a like the bubble boy, like lives in the bubble with no germs, no outside stuff, and they walk into your house and they go, I can't believe you would have this problem. Burn it to the ground. If Jesus is just divine, then we're stuck without hope because, of course, this person could never understand what I'm going through. But Jesus instead took the bubble off and said, I am a son of man. I am here with you. I will journey with you through this. And there are flies in all of your houses. And yes, it's a mess, but I'll go in anyway. I won't be polluted by it. I'll choose to root this out, and I'll teach you how to root it out as well. Jesus comes in as the exterminator. Jesus is the one who will find the heart of the problem and help you remove it. Jesus will find the thing that has been festering. This is why he will say, everything that happens in secret will be dragged into the light. Because if you follow Jesus, wherever those dark parts of your life are that have been kept away that no one else might know, he'll come and say, if you're following me, here's a spotlight. And is it uncomfortable? Yes. There's some nasty stuff buried under the couch. But it won't get any better until you pull it out and surrender it. Give it over and let him throw it away. Because Jesus is a son of man, because he is the Son of Man, his way can work for us. Because Jesus is the Son of Man, his way is possible and practical and preferable to the ways that you and I would choose to live on our own. Are you with me? What haven't you surrendered to Jesus? It's a good question. I'm tired. Maybe the saddest thing to me is when Christians live in that house. People who have said yes to Jesus, but they still live in the house with the windows just covered with flies. Their life just keeps pumping out sin. And you go, why are you choosing to live this way? Well, I was told that the gospel was just about sin management. All Jesus came to do was make me not feel bad about the disgusting state of the flies in my house. That is not why Jesus came. Jesus came to show you how to live a better way. And he came to root it out. That's the thing that we cannot do on our own. Through baptism is the forgiveness of sins and the gift of the Holy Spirit. And the gift of the Holy Spirit refreshes the house that it might be made clean. Praise God for that hope. I got to show you one more passage and then we're going to be done. When Jesus says he's the Son of Man, this is the reason that it gives us hope. But there's one last question. It's one thing for Jesus to live a sinless existence, for Jesus to say no to that disgusting state of humanity, for him to say yes to us but not live in that. It's one thing for him to do that, right? But it's another thing for the Father to accept us knowing that this has been the state of our existence. What the Bible teaches us is that through Jesus, we are forgiven by the Father, who has never stepped into this, right? It's through Jesus that the Father has an experience. This is why Hebrews says he's the great high priest. But why? Why should the Father listen to Jesus? Why should he forgive us based on Jesus' commiseration with us? The answer is found in Daniel chapter 7. It's the last passage we're going to look at this morning. Daniel chapter 7 is on page 716. And we're going to read verses 9 through 14. Daniel has a vision. He says, I watched as thrones were put in place, and the Ancient One, this would be Yahweh, the Father, sat down to judge. His clothing was as white as snow, his hair like purest wool. He sat on a fiery throne with wheels of blazing fire, and a river of fire was pouring out, flowing from his presence. Millions of angels ministered to him, and many millions stood to attend him. Then the court began its session, and the books were opened. I continued to watch because I could hear the little horn. This would be like a rebellious king on earth. His boastful speech. I kept watching until the fourth beast was killed and its body was destroyed by fire. The other three beasts had their authority taken from them, but they were allowed to live a while longer. As my vision continued that night, I saw someone like a son of man coming out of the clouds, or coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient One and was led into his presence. He was given authority, honor, and sovereignty over all the nations of the world, so that people of every race, nation, and language would obey him. His rule is eternal. It will never end. His kingdom will never be destroyed. When Jesus says, I'm a son of man, in Hebrew, and in the Greek translation of the Hebrew text, that would be the son of Adam. That's Hebrew. And it would be said in Greek language in your New Testament. So often when he says son of man, people hear, I'm human like you. Until he says it, when he's on trial, they say, are you the Holy One, the chosen one of God? I'm going to read it to you. They accuse him of this. The leading priests and entire high council were trying to find evidence against Jesus so they could put him to death. They have false witnesses accuse him. And then the high priest stood up before the others and asked, well, aren't you going to answer these charges? What do you have to say for yourself? But Jesus was silent, made no reply. Then the high priest asked him, are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One? Jesus said, I am. And you will see the Son of Man seated in the place of power at God's right hand and coming on the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest tore his clothing to show his horror and said, why do we need other witnesses? You have all heard this blasphemy. What is your verdict? Jesus says, I am the one who is both like a son of man and is God that sits at the right hand of God in the vision in Daniel. For his whole ministry, he's been saying, I'm just like you. And at the end, when they say, who are you exactly? And he says, I am the one who is equal with God. The reason that God listens to Jesus when he intercedes for us as the high priest is that he has been where we are, and he sits with the same authority of God and says, I have forgiven these people. I understand what they've gone through. Please show them mercy. And the Father says, yes. That is only possible because Jesus is the Son of Man. When you read this in the future, when you try to understand who is Jesus, we'll talk about Son of God next week, but start with he is the Son of Man, the one who is like me, who gives me hope because he was like me, but who sits in authority because he is also divine. And in his role as Son of Man, he says forgive, and the Father says okay. That is a Jesus you can trust because he knows what you're going through. It's a Jesus who will advocate for you because he knows where you are. And it's a Jesus who will help fix your life forever. What a good God. If we can love you or help you, serve you, help you get to know Jesus, would you let us know how? We're going to stand and sing together.